There's a couple of different things people say that drive me a little bit crazy. One of them is the phrase, I can't. Whenever I hear people say, I can't, it always makes me just kind of wonder, why in the world are you putting a label on yourself that limits yourself that way? Maybe I don't want to, I don't know how. Could you help me accomplish this? I'm not sure how to do this. I'm afraid I don't have the ability right now. Things like that. But people will just say, I can't, oftentimes when they've never even tried it. What they're really saying oftentimes is, I'm scared. The other is fair. That's not fair. Oh, I wish that I could find a little more fair deal, something like that. We're not talking about the county fair, which the county fair and going to those state fairs and county fairs, those are absolutely insane. I just saw the other day they wanted $25 to ride the Ferris wheel one time. I can't believe that they'd actually charge that much money just to ride on a little circle up in the air and back down. What I wanted to talk about today is this concept of fair and what's a good deal, what's a bad deal, what is a fair deal, what's not a fair deal, and some of the perspective and different ways of looking at that so that you can come together with customers or potential customers or business partners and come up with deals that actually work for both parties and end up being quote unquote fair. So again, when we're looking at fair, or when you hear someone say fair, usually what that means is we're going to have a person, we're going to illustrate that person with a red dot. And this red dot represents the person saying fair. And they're right there on this piece of paper. And when they're looking at something and they say that's not fair, most of the time they have their perspective looking at a certain direction. And what they see from that certain direction is a list of items, right? And so it may be the cost, maybe one of the items, and another item that they're looking at is their perceived benefit. And then they also may be looking at other deals. They may be looking at other options. But what the common thread is what this person has done is they're taking their knowledge, their experience, all of the information that they've gathered in their brain over time, and they're analyzing a situation to try and determine if that situation is really a good deal. Does it benefit them? Now, oftentimes people use the word fair to try and illustrate the point that the situation that they're perceiving is not one that benefits them as much as they would like. So anyone who's had a kid or has been around kids will have heard a kid say, hey, that's not fair. And then they immediately list one or two circumstances that have happened recently that illustrate how some other person has a better shot at life than they do. And one of the key elements that happens every single time is that person has a very narrow viewpoint. They're seeing only maybe 10% of the circumstance. They're not seeing the remaining variables that are at play here. And oftentimes that perspective is very limited in scope, both in direction and also in time. So one of the things that I've noticed that people often do is when they're talking about things that are fair, they're thinking in very short terms. So they're going to look at this deal and they're going to say, I have to pay you X amount of money to get these immediate benefits, but oftentimes they're not thinking in the long term. So how do we get people who are saying something is not fair to come to terms with you and find a deal that is going to be fair for everyone? Well, there's a few different ways we can accomplish this, but the first one is you need to listen. You need to listen to what they're saying, and as you listen to what they're saying, understand where they're coming from, their perspective, and the scope that they're looking at the circumstances in. So you're going to listen, and then the next key is to understand them. So when you understand them, you're going to, again, understand things like their values. So we're going to put them here, and you're going to understand their values. You're going to understand their experiences, their goals. You want to understand their fears. When you can come to a situation where you understand somebody, you understand what they value, you understand some of their experiences, you understand their goals, you understand their fears, all of a sudden you have the ability to take a situation that may seem not fair to them and reframe it or adjust the deal so that it goes from being not fair to being one that's going to help them to reduce fears, accomplish goals, and it's going to come in a way that validates their values. So if you're in a deal with someone and they feel like you don't understand them, they're going to have a hard time believing that you can create a circumstance that is fair instead of not fair. But once you understand them and you can speak to them in terms that they are using, so if they're saying, yeah, I really am scared that this won't work out because X, Y, and Z. And you can reflect that back to them and say, I understand you're scared this deal's not going to work out because of X, Y, and Z. So let's adjust this deal a little bit to accommodate that fear. And we're going to put this guarantee in here that if the deal's not done by such and such a date, we're going to give you this, one of their values, as compensation. And they'd say, wow, thank you so much for creating a fair deal for me. But what they're really saying is, thank you for understanding who I am. Thank you for understanding what I value. Thank you for understanding my fears. And thank you most of all for helping me accomplish my goals. So when we're doing business with people, if we want to be successful and you want to move from the not fair deal to a fair deal with people, the number one step is to first listen. Then number two step is to understand. And then finally, you can create a circumstance that's going to reduce their fears, help them achieve their goals while validating their values.